When I decided to run for Congress back in 2006, I did it because I thought the Bush tax cuts were fundamentally unfair, that at a time of very difficult circumstances for many Americans and also fighting two wars, that the notion that we should cut taxes for the very wealthiest was offensive and demonstrated the wrong values. And that was at a time, actually, when the social safety net was much better than it will be under the Republican budget. Mr. Ryan calls this budget the path to prosperity. It's actually a payback for the prosperous. This is a budget that asks virtually all Americans to suffer, to take a little pain, but it asks nothing of the very wealthiest Americans, the ones who have experienced the greatest growth in their income and wealth over the last 10 years, probably in the history of this country, at least in the last 80 or 90 years. What we've seen here under the Ryan budget is a proposal that over the next 10 years will reduce taxes for the wealthiest 2% of Americans by $807 billion. At the same time, as Chris mentioned and others will, cutting Medicaid by $1 trillion, cutting education funding, cutting research and development, cutting support programs for low-income seniors and people with low-income families with children, all of the things that I think reflect well on our values as a nation. They don't ask the wealthiest to pay a penny. They maintain all of the tax breaks for the oil companies in spite of the fact that they have made $900 billion in profit over the last decade. They have maintained all the tax breaks, all the tax expenditures, which amount to $1 trillion a year. These are tax expenditures which, if they were actually recorded on the budget as government programs, Republicans would howl about. But since they're through the tax code and benefit, again, their major supporters and the wealthiest Americans, they're fine. Those tax expenditures alone amount to almost all of discretionary spending in the budget, including defense. They don't touch any of those. This is the most imbalanced, reckless budget that has been offered in modern history. It exacts a high price on virtually all Americans except the very wealthiest. This is the mentioned, $800 billion versus $771 billion cut in Medicaid. This is the statement of the Republican values right here. These are the wealthy. Those are the people who need care and need aid. And I want to say one thing about this notion that you need to cut taxes to generate economic prosperity. My brother is in the barbecue restaurant business. He does very, very well. I happen to be an investor in that business. I do well because of my investment. We would all be impacted by returning to the pre-Bush tax cut levels. My brother in 2008 said, I'm going to support Barack Obama this year, even though he was always a Republican, and he always wanted to pay less tax. I said, why did you say that, Bob? What's your epiphany? He said, I finally realized that if nobody can afford barbecue, it doesn't matter what my tax rate is. This is a statement about where we are as a country. It doesn't matter what these tax rates are for anybody if there's no business. And business people recognize that. We had a meeting in Louisville yesterday. White House Business Council put a roundtable, put on a meeting, all business people in the room, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. Virtually everybody in that room was asking for more government support for education, for things like child care, for research and development. I thought I was at a progressive caucus meeting. And these were business people. They didn't mention tax rates on the wealthiest people in the country. They know that in order to be a vibrant nation into the future, we need to make the kind of investments that are going to invest in human capital. This budget doesn't do that. Again, it imposes great pain on the people who can least withstand it and gives great benefit to the people who don't need it.
Thank you, John. Next, we're going to hear from